Hey, what's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. I'm not anywhere today. I just want to give you guys a few updates. So I know yesterday you guys were messaging me. A lot of you guys were messaging me saying that Google Classroom wasn't working. You weren't able to upload your files, or the files were not found. I let Mrs. Mendez know, and I spoke to your other teachers. And I guess this is not just a problem you're having with my class, but you're having with other classes. Even myself, when I tried to get the files on my phone, it wasn't working. But when I went onto my laptop, it was working. So thank you for messaging me. Bear with us. We're still trying to figure out what's going on. Mrs. Mendez is gonna reach out to the tech people to see what's going on with that. Um, but I appreciate you guys messaging me because at least you're still on task and you're still doing what you need to do. Secondly, I know that we were scheduled to come back on April 1st, but that is getting postponed. So we just got word right now, maybe like an hour ago, that we are going to be out of school until at least April 20th is when we'll return. So after spring break. That's what they have in store for us right now, but we'll see what's going on because we have to still follow along with what California is telling us to do and what LA is doing. So a few more weeks of this, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we can go back to school. All right, so yesterday we talked about Jefferson's inauguration speech and what his policies were when he first came into the White House. So remember his inauguration speech? Inauguration speech is a speech that every president gives as soon as they get into office, just to let everybody know what their policies are. Jefferson made it really clear that his policies were going to limit the federal government's power, strengthen the state government's power, give more power to the people, and focus really on the small businesses and not really worry about manufacturing. So some of the things that he wanted to do was he wanted to make sure that everyone was united. He thought that the two political parties were getting too distant from each other, and he wanted to unite everybody. He also wanted to make sure that the government remained small and that they had to stay to what they wanted to do. So overall, Jefferson, he had a vision of Washington, D.C., how he wanted this capital city, which he got. Don't forget that he got rid of the Alien Sedition Acts. He thought this was unfair, it violated people's rights, and he got rid of that. He got rid of some of the taxes, such as the whiskey tax and other taxes that he thought was unfair to certain people. And the last thing what he did was he shrunk the Army and the Navy, and he decided that if we can save money with the Army and Navy, then we can go ahead and pay off some of the debt. And the real thing of the government is pretty much to make sure that we're all safe, to deliver the mail, and to make sure that they are collecting taxes. Everything else will be handled by the people. So that's what he thought about the government. The last thing they did was, although he did not get along with Hamilton, he did keep the bank because he thought the bank was going to help get rid of the national debt that the U.S. had incurred. So today we're going to talk about the Marbury and Madison, which was a court case, a law case, but we're going to talk about the importance of this court case. And like anytime a president steps into office, first off, they're probably going to run into a problem, and this was the first problem that Jefferson ran into, and it was all because of Adams. And Adams did something real dirty to Jefferson, and this typically is what happens towards the end of a presidency. When a president knows they're going to leave office or their term's about to be up, they might create a problem that somebody else has to deal with. And this is the first problem that we'll talk about. But first, let's go ahead and review the questions from yesterday. So, number one, in his 1801 inaugural address, what political ideas did Jefferson express? Jefferson, even though he read his speech in a very quiet voice, he wanted to make it clear that he supported the majority of the people. He was a man of the people. He also wanted to stress the need for a limited government. Remember, he thought the government was only supposed to deliver mail, collect taxes, and protect the people. And the last thing was he wanted to protect all citizens' rights and freedoms. For example, he got rid of the Alien Sedition Act because it violated their freedoms. Number two, how did Jefferson and Congress put these democratic ideas into practice? Well, first, he got rid of the Alien Sedition Acts. That was one of them. Second thing that he did was he lowered military spending and used that money that he saves on the military to go ahead and pay off the national debt. Another way that he started to protect people's rights and liberties was taking away some of the taxes that were being placed on him, such as the whiskey tax. Another thing that he did was he shrunk the army. And I think I mentioned that before. So these are how he put his ideas into practice. Number 3, why did Jefferson want to keep the national government small? Jefferson wanted to keep the government small because he thought there was no need for them to do anything else. He thought that their only functions or their only things that they were in charge of was to protect the nation from foreign threats, deliver mail, and to collect taxes or collect duties. That's the only thing that he thought the national government was needed for, so that's why he thought he can keep it small. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be able to explain the significance or explain the importance of the Marbury versus Madison court case, and we're going to use this and see how the Madison Marbury case increased the power of the judicial branch in government. So let's go ahead and get to the slides for today. So when Jefferson became a president, the Republican Party pretty much dominated the executive branch, which was the president, and the legislative branch, which was Congress. And because of this, you have to remember Congress and the president worked together to get things done. And with both of them being heavily dominated by Republicans, it was probably going to be easy for them to get things done because they would all be on the same page. John Adams, before he left office, he realized this. And what he did was he decided to do a really, really dirty move. And what he did was he decided that we are going to go ahead and put a bunch of Federalists into the judiciary branch. So what Adams did right before the clock was about to strike midnight and before he was not the president anymore, while no one was looking and no one was aware, what he did was he appointed or he assigned 16 different federal judges in office. And when he did this so last minute that not even all their paperwork and files were even put away and made official. But Adams did this because he said, if we can go ahead and get some Federalists in here, maybe we'll have some power in the government. Turns out that this became such a controversy that Jefferson had to deal with this issue, and there was no need for Adams to do this dirty move on Jefferson, but he wanted to do something just to give Jefferson a little problems. In the end, it's going to turn out good, and it's going to actually help the U.S. because based on this problem that they had to face or deal with, it showed how we can make some adjustments to the government and how we can make sure that all branches are kept in check and all branches are equal in power. So as you see in this comic, you can see Adams right there, and he's just like doing like Oprah saying, you're a judge, you're a judge, you're a judge, you're a judge. And that's exactly what he was doing. So everybody was made a judge. Like I was telling you before, some of these appointments were made so last minute that the documents weren't even authorized and it wasn't even delivered to Adams' office in time. So this led to a lot of controversy. One person that made the most controversy was this guy named William Marbury. So William Marbury, he was named the Justice of Peace by President Adams, but he did not even receive his documents or was never made official before Adams left presidency and the clock struck midnight and then Jefferson was the president. So Marbury was pretty much in no man's land saying, well, Adams told me I was his Chief Justice, but my papers never got signed. So Jefferson's pretty much saying, well, then I didn't assign you, I don't have your paperwork, so you're not going to be part of the government or you're not going to be part of the judiciary branch. So Marbury, he was extremely upset, and what he did was he decided, I'm going to take this case to court. I'm actually taking it to the Supreme Court. Jefferson said, go for it. You might as well take it to the Supreme Court because I don't believe you, and since you have no paperwork, it's not official, and you are not part of the court justices. Marbury was complaining and saying that the Judiciary Act of 1789 gave the Supreme Court power to go ahead and see his court, but like we all know, the Supreme Court can only really see courts or solve cases that really affect a lot of people, and because this only really affected Marbury, it wasn't really necessary for the Supreme Court to see this court or see and make a ruling for this case. So John Marshall, who was a Federalist and he was in charge of the Chief Justice of the United States, him and Jefferson didn't really see eye to eye, and because of the two different parties, and he decided, you know what, we are going to go ahead and hear this case because the Judiciary Act does say that he can do this. So he pretty much went behind Jefferson's back and agreed to hear this case, but the Supreme Court isn't really going to want to do this, so we're going to move on. So this is where it gets a little confusing. In the Judiciary Act of 1799, it gave the Supreme Court the authority to hear a bunch of different cases, including Marbury's, But the Supreme Court said that the Congress didn't have the power to make this law. It was never approved by anyone, and this law that they were making was just a law just to get the Supreme Court to hear all these cases. So what happened was they decided that this law was in conflict of the Constitution and that it needed to be removed because remember, the Judiciary Act or the Judiciary Branch was the one that interpreted the laws and made sure that they followed through with the Constitution. If they didn't follow through with the Constitution, they would have to shut them down. So Marbury versus Madison, this actually established what the Supreme Court's power was and how they were able to check the power of other branches. Congress passed this law as a last minute law to pass just so they can hear this court case, and the Supreme Court caught it and said, "Nope, sorry, this is against the Constitution. You cannot do this." And pretty much what it did was it gave more power to the Supreme Court. It showed that the Supreme Court can only hear certain cases, and this is not one of them. Another thing why it was important was it confirmed the Supreme Court's power to declare acts of the Constitution of the Congress unconstitutional. So anything the Congress did, now it had to get approved by the Judiciary Act or the judicial branch. In denying Marbury's request in this way, the court avoided a direct confrontation with Jefferson's administration. But there was more important. It actually established the power of this thing called the judicial review. And the judicial review is the power to declare any act of Congress unconstitutional. So what happened was later Marshall and the federal judges would use this power of judicial review to make any to make the judiciary branch a lot stronger. Because now what happened was that typically the president will come up with an idea, Congress will pass the idea, and it will become a law. Now, president will pretty much propose something, Congress will approve it, and now it has to go to the judicial branch to make sure that it goes in line. So now we have this whole circle or a little triangle, a trio of approvals, and pretty much it makes sure that everything is in line with the Constitution. So overall, this case, although it was not heard, it made great movements for the United States. It proved that the Supreme Court can only hear a certain amount of cases, and it showed that the Supreme Court was able to check people and keep other branches in power or other branches in check and limit the power of other branches. And also it decided that the judicial branch could declare any act of the Congress unconstitutional if it doesn't follow along with the Constitution. So in review, we talked about the Marbury and Madison case, and this all came about when John Adams decided to pull a sneaky, dirty move on Jefferson. On the eve of his end of presidency, what he did was he appointed 16 different judges. This was so last minute that a lot of these judges didn't even get their approval paperwork signed, and by the time the clock struck midnight, Jefferson was now in charge, and he had no idea what was going on. Marbury decided to take this case to court. He said that the Judiciary Act of 1789 said it was okay, and that the Supreme Court must hear this court because I was appointed by Adams. They pretty much shot down this case and said, "Sorry, you are lying. This law that you guys made up has nothing to do with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can only really hear a certain amount of cases." This was really important because it established the power of the Supreme Court and the judicial branch, which is includes the Supreme Court. So with this case, the reason why this case was so important was that it showed that the judicial branch was able to balance the powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So it kept all the balance of power. Another reason why it was also important was it created the judicial review. And what this judicial review was, it made sure that everything, all laws, anything that Congress did was in line with the Constitution and that it was fair and it followed the guidelines. So this is why the Madison and Marbury case was so important in the U.S. politics and creating a balance of power between all branches. So for homework, what I want you guys to talk about is what happened as a result of James Madison's refusal to deliver William Marbury's appointment papers. What happened because he never got approved? Number 2, why is the power of judicial review important? Think about people extending their rules or things that aren't following the Constitution. Number 3, explain the Supreme Court's ruling in Marbury and Madison. So explain, what did the Supreme Court rule and what did they find out from having this case on board? So hopefully you guys understood this lesson. It is a little confusing because of the rulings and things that were going on. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I can go ahead and answer them. Or if not, you can just look up Madison Marbury and why it was so important if you need extra help. If that's not the case, then I'll see you guys all tomorrow.